It was supposed to be an ordinary charity luncheon, filled with polished smiles, expensive suits, and carefully rehearsed speeches. But in the middle of the glittering ballroom, one quiet moment stopped time. A young single father, dressed in a faded jacket that had clearly seen better days, accidentally looked a little too long at the most powerful woman in the room. Gasps spread among the guests as security noticed him. Everyone expected the billionaire to be offended. Instead, she slowly walked toward him, leaned close enough that only he could hear, and whispered 6 words that would change both of their lives forever. No one in that room could have imagined that those words would uncover a story of loss, courage, sacrifice, and a miracle neither of them had been searching for. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can change lives and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Your support helps us bring more heartwarming stories that remind the world that hope is never truly lost. The morning sun poured through the tall glass windows of the Grand Meridian Hotel, turning the marble floors into rivers of golden light. It was one of the city's biggest charity events, attended by celebrities, politicians, business leaders, and the wealthiest families in the country. Cameras flashed constantly as luxury cars lined up outside. Every guest wore confidence as if it were another expensive accessory. Among them walked Nolan Mercer, carrying his 6-year-old daughter, Ivy, by the hand. He wasn't supposed to be there. A local children's foundation had invited several struggling families whose lives had been helped by community programs. Nolan almost declined because he owned only one formal shirt, and its collar was beginning to fray. But Ivy had begged him to go. She wanted to see the giant ballroom she had seen in a brochure and eat the tiny colorful desserts she imagined tasted like magic. Since losing his wife 3 years earlier to a sudden illness, every day had become a careful balancing act. Nolan worked long hours repairing heating systems and air conditioners while raising Ivy alone. Bills arrived faster than paychecks. Some evenings dinner was nothing more than soup and toast, but he never let Ivy notice how often he skipped his own meal so she could have enough. His greatest fear wasn't poverty. It was failing the little girl who still believed her father could fix anything. Across the ballroom stood Celeste Arden, the youngest self-made billionaire in the country. At only 38, she had built a technology empire worth billions, yet success had come with a heavy price. Magazine covers celebrated her achievements, but they never mentioned the loneliness waiting behind the doors of her enormous penthouse. Years of chasing success had slowly pushed away friendships and family until her calendar was full while her heart remained painfully empty. She donated millions every year, hoping generosity might fill the silence that money never could. As Celeste greeted donors, something unusual caught her attention. Across the room, Nolan wasn't staring with envy or admiration. His eyes carried something different. Recognition. Confusion. A painful memory that refused to stay buried. Security noticed him first. One guard quietly stepped forward, assuming the poorly dressed man might become a problem. Guests began whispering. Some looked away while others watched with silent judgment. Nolan immediately lowered his eyes, embarrassed that his innocent glance had attracted unwanted attention. He reached for Ivy's hand, hoping to leave unnoticed. Instead, Celeste raised one hand, stopping security in their tracks. She walked through the silent crowd until she stood only inches away from Nolan. Then she leaned close and softly whispered, "You knew my brother, didn't you?" Nolan's heart nearly stopped. 20 years earlier, before wealth had transformed Celeste's life, she had been an ordinary university student. Her older brother, Ethan, had been her hero. One rainy afternoon, Ethan rescued a frightened teenage boy trapped inside a flooded underpass after a violent storm. That frightened boy had been Nolan. The rescue cost Ethan his own life. The newspapers called him a hero for a week before the city moved on. Nolan never forgot. He had spent years trying to discover what became of Ethan's family, but every attempt ended in disappointment. Standing before him now was the younger sister whose face had changed with time but whose eyes remained exactly the same. Emotion overwhelmed them both. Celeste had grown up believing no one remembered her brother anymore. Yet here stood a man whose entire life had been shaped by Ethan's final act of courage. The ballroom suddenly felt smaller. For the first time in years, Celeste stopped thinking about quarterly profits, investments, or board meetings. She wanted to hear every chapter of the story that connected this struggling father to the brother she still missed every single day. They moved to a quiet garden outside where sunlight danced across blooming flowers. Ivy chased butterflies while Nolan finally shared the truth he had carried for 2 decades. He admitted that survivor's guilt had haunted him throughout his life. Ethan's sacrifice inspired him to become the kind of father who always placed others first. Whenever life became difficult, he remembered that someone had once given everything so he could have another chance. Celeste listened with tears filling her eyes. She realized something extraordinary. Her brother hadn't disappeared from the world after all. His kindness had continued living inside someone else. That afternoon, instead of returning to the stage for another speech, Celeste quietly canceled her remaining meetings. She spent hours with Nolan and Ivy, laughing over simple stories, sharing memories, and rediscovering emotions she had hidden beneath years of business success. Over the following weeks, she visited Nolan's neighborhood without photographers or reporters. She saw the tiny apartment where Ivy proudly displayed hand-drawn pictures on peeling walls. She watched Nolan help elderly neighbors repair broken appliances without asking for payment because he understood what it meant to struggle. His kindness reminded her of Ethan every single day. Without making a public announcement, Celeste created a scholarship in Ethan's memory for children raised by single parents. She partnered with local organizations to provide housing assistance, childcare, and job training for families facing impossible circumstances. When reporters asked why her charitable work had suddenly expanded, she simply smiled and said that the greatest investments were always made in people. Meanwhile, Nolan's own life slowly transformed. A management position opened inside one of Celeste's nonprofit organizations. She never handed him success. Instead, she recognized his honesty, work ethic, and compassion. Nolan earned the role through dedication, eventually helping hundreds of struggling parents rebuild their lives. Little Ivy blossomed as well. The shy little girl who once dreamed about tiny desserts eventually became one of the scholarship program's first graduates. Years later, she studied pediatric medicine, determined to help children whose families faced hardships similar to her own. The ripple created by Ethan's sacrifice had reached another generation. One simple act of courage had traveled across 20 years, touching lives he would never live to see. Before we reach the ending, we have one heartfelt request. Please comment, "Kindness never dies," if you believe even the smallest act of compassion can create a ripple that changes someone's future forever. As the years passed, Celeste often visited a quiet hillside where Ethan rested. She no longer came with overwhelming grief. Instead, she brought stories. Stories about children finding hope, parents rebuilding broken lives, and one little girl whose future existed only because her brother had once chosen courage over fear. Standing beside her was Nolan, holding Ivy's graduation photo, both silently thanking the man whose final act had become the beginning of countless new lives. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Every share spreads another ripple of compassion, reminding us that true wealth is never measured by money, but by the lives we lift. Sometimes the greatest miracle begins with nothing more than a whisper, a memory, and the courage to choose kindness when no one is watching.